Hello and welcome to The Comic Cave. I'm Ramsey, aka Captain Away, and today I'm looking at the 2013 to 2016 series Harley Quinn, part of DC's The New 52. In case by this point you've somehow managed to get here without knowing who Harley Quinn is, she was actually initially created in 1992 for the Batman animated series episode Joker's Favor, as just one member of Joker's crew. She would go on to gain popularity throughout the series, including leading to my personal favorite episode of the series, Harley's Holiday. It wouldn't be for 7 more years, though, that she finally made her comic book debut, in an in-continuity comic, during the No Man's Land story that ran through all Batman titles for most of 1999. She would continue to grow in popularity, eventually even appearing in a couple live-action movies, and by this point having received multiple solo, well-received comic series, including one helmed by husband and wife team Amanda Conner and Jimmy Palmiotti, which is the subject of today's video. Both members of this pair were already part of the comics industry long before this series started, so do all these combined years of experience add up to a more wild and entertaining comic? Well, let's find out and take this away. The comic opens with an issue 0 that's a weird dream sequence as Harley breaks the fourth wall by talking directly to her creators as they pretend to look for an artist for the series, giving us plenty of single-page mini-comics done by guest artists, like one of my faves, Becky Cloonan, as well as Harley creator Bruce Timm, a reprint of a page drawn by Jim Lee, a Sam Keith page that seems to be a reference to his famous series The Max, and one done by Adam Hughes, where they reference both that time he drew Mr. Manhattan's Big Blue Penis in a Watchmen comic, and the fact that he's not so great at meeting deadlines, which was probably primarily a reference to the All-Star Wonder Woman comic he was supposed to do that I don't think ever actually came out. The issue ends with Harley receiving a thoughtful bomb from the Joker that blows up the storage container that seems to have been her home. Luckily, right then, a man shows up letting her know that she's gained ownership of an apartment building in New York. So Harley Quinn forgoes DC's stand-in New York to move to actual New York. Why? Because I'm pretty sure Amanda Conner and Jimmy Palmiotti can't write a comic that's not set in New York. I mean, even the one issue of the 2005 Supergirl comic that they worked on inexplicably took place in New York, even though none of the issues before or after it seemed to be set there. Or you can argue that the distinctive Brooklyn accent original voice actor Arlene Sorkin gave the character helped fuel this decision, but I'm gonna fault the creators. This is my review, I do what I want. Besides, the series is absolutely obsessed with New York, in a way that only lifelong New Yorkers are capable of being, and Harley herself, they will repeatedly state, grew up in Canarsie. I mean, repeatedly. As in, a lot. Unfortunately for Harley, ownership of this building isn't cheap. She's still stuck paying dues on it, and the rent of those already living there only covers so much of that. So before long, she takes a job as a psychiatrist at a senior care facility and also joins a roller derby. I enjoy that Palmiotti and Conner remember that Harley actually has a PhD, but her job at the senior care center doesn't really highlight her brains. Instead, it primarily seems to be an excuse for Harley to stumble into crazy adventures. Like, Harley needed an excuse for that. Like when she tortures and kidnaps the family of this old lady, their grandmother, because she told Harley that they were mean to her, which turns out to not be true. Or when Harley meets Cy Borgman, a ridiculous stereotype of an old New York Jewish man that definitely feels like it pushes past the borderline of offensive. He literally has bagel grenades in his chair. Bagel grenades. Yeah. At absolutely every opportunity that they can give themselves, PNC will say perhaps the most disparaging thing they can about Jewish people in the situation. And they give themselves a lot of opportunities. Cy Borgman's story is that he was once a secret agent working for the US government, an experimental soldier named Cyborg. Get it? Cyborg Man? Borgman convinces Harley that there's an old communist conspiracy entrenched in the heart of their beloved city, and they set out to kill the secret agents before they can complete their missions, which apparently they weren't even trying to do anyway. One of them was literally in a coma for the past several decades or so. The rest just seem to have taken to life in America. But that doesn't stop the demented duo from killing all of them in pretty gruesome and messed up ways. But I guess it's not exactly like Harley Quinn is supposed to be the good guy here. This comic isn't just wild and crazy and murderous shenanigans. Harley is shown to be pretty smart as the series goes on. My favorite moments of the comic are really when Harley comes across other psychopaths, and together the two act pretty crazy, and their adventures end with Harley going all psychiatrist on them, and reasons them through their problems. Like this obsessed fan who kidnaps her. Instead of bashing his brains in, which seems like what would be the expected response, she just hangs out with him for a while, getting to know him, and finally recommends a course of treatment, promising to even considering going on a date with him if he sticks to his regimen. Wow, that's really understanding of you, Harley. Good for you. On her way to work one day, Harley comes across a protest at a pet store where they are planning to euthanize all the pets that aren't adopted. Understandably upset by this news, Harley stages a jailbreak, releasing all the animals and ends up adopting them all on top of that. Luckily, she has an entire empty floor of her building to keep them in, and her best gal pal, Poison Ivy, shows up to turn the floor into a luxurious mid-building indoor park. Which, I mean, that defies all kinds of physics, but hey, whatever. I want one. Ivy doesn't show up just to make some trees grow in Brooklyn, but also to help out Harley with her hired assassins problem. It seems someone put out a hit on Harley, and to find out who, she gets the help of her favorite tech lady. The plant lady? Okay. Yeah, for some reason, Ivy in the series has computer skills that would shame Felicity Smoke. It's almost like they thought it was some kind of joke. This lady who wants to bring everything back to the Garden of Eve is the most technologically savvy person in the book, like in Next Gen when they had the blind guy driving the Enterprise. Whatever the reason, I'm pretty down, honestly, because Ivy ends up being pretty much my favorite part of this whole series. We get to see a return of her and Harley's relationship that first got started in the animated series, and there's a lot of heavy innuendo about what's going on between the two of them. And much like this series remembers that Harley must have brains in there somewhere, they also remember that Ivy is Dr. Pamela Isley. So she pretty much gets to come in, be smart, get things done, and have a little fun with her bestie Harley. It's a pretty refreshing take on the character, and she kinda sticks out like a sore thumb from all the rest of the bizarre caricatures hanging around. It honestly feels like she was written by someone else for a different series, and then just dropped into this one by mistake. What Ivy, with her mad computer hacking skills, learns is that the person who put a hit out on Harley is Harley. Apparently she was contracting herself? While sleeping, she got up, posted the bounty on her head on the internet, and thus sent the killers after herself. Apparently, the reasoning was that eventually she'd be dealing with these people anyway, for some reason, so why not just cut to the chase and bring them after her immediately? Or something like that. I don't know, I don't think making sense was a primary goal of this series. So, between taking care of the building, her two jobs, taking care of an entire floor of pets, dealing with assassins, and trying to find time for her romantic interest, the recently escaped from prison massive mountain of man meat, Mason Macabre, man that was a lot of M's, son of Madame Macabre, who runs a serial killer themed house of wax in Harley's building, Harley decides there just isn't enough of her to go around. So she decides to hire out for a bunch of people willing to be crazy and attempt to be vigilantes, and starts her own gang of Harleys. It's entirely possible the Gang of Harleys only came into existence to make fun of the We Are Robin series, which saw a bunch of kids all across Gotham City dressing up like Robin in order to fight crime. To drive that point home, there's even an issue cover here that mocks the cover of the first issue of that series. And just in case you somehow didn't get it, they go ahead and just slap a We Are Robin issue 1 cover onto this one. Subtlety? Who needs it? Let's just explain our jokes outright. Whatever the reason for their creation, they do stick around for a fair chunk of the story. They even get their own spin-off miniseries where they go off largely on their own adventure, which is actually the second spin-off series from this title. The first was when Harley Quinn was hanging out with an amnesiac Power Girl, claiming to be her sidekick. The two confronted obviously A-list villains, Sportsmaster and Clock King, in the local mall. Clock King conveniently had a special teleportation ring that he was able to send the pair through that launched them into a far-off region of space, where they run across a bit of a parody of Thanos in his love of fine jewelry, with this guy named Monos and his Rings of Fate. These rings, which match the Clock King's, are the pair's ticket back home. So with the help of a not at all Nebula-like daughter of Monos, PG and HQ are able to defeat the evil space overlord and return home. Before they can recover, though, Claw King sends them back through the ring, and this time they fall into a spin-off series, and then back again in the very next panel. Convenient how that works out. In order to ensure being able to keep her gang, Harley blackmails the mayor into having the police leave her and the gang alone. He agrees, but that does leave some loopholes. The mayor's son accidentally died in a bar fight, and the mayor is holding as responsible Mason Macabre, that personality-free hulking hunk that Harley is for some reason all goo-goo-eyed over. Even though I'd expect her to like, I don't know, kinda damaged or something. That's why he was in jail in the first place, and after trying to go on a date with Harley, who the mayor is having followed, he's captured and thrown in jail again. The mayor's security chief orders to have Mason accidentally die in prison, so he's repeatedly beaten by the other inmates. Harley manages to convince the warden to send Mason to another prison, but the same security chief is able to make that prison none other than Arkham Asylum. So Harley goes to bust Mason out of Arkham, running into her ex while doing so. Joker and Harley have the lover spat to end all lover spats. Although, actually, it's surprisingly reminiscent of the one they had in Death of the Family. The conclusion of this fight, and really honestly the entire portrayal of it, is a bit unsatisfying to me. But I do like the joke they make out of it on a new jacket for Harley later in the series. Nice. Harley succeeds in busting Mason out of Arkham, but Batman ends up intervening, offering Mason witness protection to turn evidence against the mayor. Though this does mean that Mason will have to disappear for a while. Darn. And he was such an exciting and interesting character. When Harley returns home, she puts on a new look to be more in line with the then upcoming Suicide Squad movie. Which is pretty funny because the new 52 Suicide Squad comic running at this time had only just recently caught up to giving her the outfit from this series, instead of the one that was created at the beginning of that series to make her into a sex symbol. At this point, she also runs afoul of a new villain that takes his inspiration from her and from a tool shed. He calls himself the Red Tool, dresses in her colors, and seems to want equal parts to kill her and date her. He has a mysterious past that they never really cover, but that's okay as it probably wouldn't be all that interesting anyway. He's clearly just designed to be a Deadpool pastiche, probably simply because the Deadpool movie was coming out around this time. But in case you missed it, they go ahead in their typical oh-so-subtle way and just shout it out across the page for you. While dealing with Red Tool, what was his name again? Red Tool. While dealing with Red Tool, Harley also brings some conclusion to her conflict with the mayor. She makes a new deal with the mayor's new security chief to win some media attention for him by turning in a bunch of New York's most wanted that Red Tool had captured and offered to Harley in an effort to court her. Yeah, he thought that would work. He clearly has a screw loose. Yeah? Screw loose? I'm sorry, I won't do that again. That's all there really is to this comic, at least to the plot of it, and that's covering 31 regular issues and 8 specials. Yeah, it's not a lot of plot. Of course, the idea of the comic isn't to be an intense, deep, dramatic story, but an outrageous comedy. To achieve that end, the storytelling adopts a design every bit as hectic and easily distracted as Harley Quinn herself. It seriously can't, at any point, stay focused on any one thing. There's so much jumping around for no reason from one subject to another. I get why they would do this, but it honestly makes it a bit of a pain to read. It's exhausting how hyperactive the plot is, and we don't spend enough time with any single character or in any single place to really gain any kind of attachment to it, or enough of an understanding to it to really make jokes worth it in the first place. Some of the reason for this is to squeeze in comedic bits out of as many places as possible. Unfortunately, I'm not really sure who would find any of their so-called comedy to actually be that funny. The vast majority of it is simply something really disgusting happening, usually something involving poop, and I guess that's supposed to be funny all on its own? The entire comedic presence in this comic can be summed up by a joke that they legitimately make themselves. With an entire floor of pets, Harley has a serious animal mess disposal situation to take care of. In order to simplify the process, one of her tenants, Big Tony, get it? Cause he's not big? Builds a giant catapult. Yeah, the scatapult. Yeah. They then proceed to literally lob bags of shit at anything Connor and Palmiotti dislike, including the DC offices at one point. I do kind of find this joke about a New 52 reboot of all DC titles kind of funny, not really because it's funny on its own, but because this would have been around the time of the Convergence event, which was a sort of soft reboot of the DC titles already, and only a couple years before DC Rebirth, which was another entire relaunch of all their titles that rebooted the universe again, just as they're kind of saying will happen here. But aside from taking some jabs at their boss, mostly it's just tossing poo at hipsters. Because this series spends kind of an unbelievable amount of time taking shots at hipsters. Harley complains constantly about young people coming into neighborhoods and buying up properties and having weird trendy interests. Because despite all appearances, Harley is apparently a 50-something-year-old. I mean, how dare there be young people who need places to live and have different interests than you? What is the world? What is the world? And I guess what better way to get back at the things your old person grumbling about than to literally draw someone throwing poop at it. The final issue of the series is even entirely about this, specifically, with Harley trying to prevent a tree being chopped down so that a new building can't be built so that young people can't move in to yet another place on Coney Island, ruining her image of New York. The tree ends up being cut down anyway, but with the help of Poison Ivy, they turn the plot into a swampland, and literally say they'll be watching the Rebirth, as in the then occurring DC Rebirth event in case they were being too subtle for you, from up in their tree. In the biggest travesty of all, Harley lives in a building. The entire series takes place in this building with a house of wax in it, and we get to see that house of wax for like a whole 3 panels of this entire series? Come on! What? So I like wax sculptures. I'm not weird, you're weird. Let's just get to the breakdown. There are a lot of things I theoretically like about this series. I like that Harley gets away from the Joker because while I love Harley Quinn, I do hate the Joker. I love that Connor and Palmiotti actually remember Quinn is intelligent, not just a perky ditz. I love the portrayal of Ivy in this series, especially the clear acknowledgement of the relationship between the two women. But perhaps because of the comedic nature of the comic, perhaps because of editorial oversight, or even for some other reason, this relationship sadly comes down to little more than a bunch of innuendo. Also, every other side character in this series is pretty unremarkable. Maybe they could have been interesting, but we see so little of them that they never get the chance to become anything. The plot is just too unfocused and nonsensical for its own good, and the humor lacks in just about every way. In the end, it kinda just feels like the creators pretty much turned Harley into a superhero for aging, borderline anti-Semitic New Yorkers that really hate hipsters. And while there are a lot of people in New York, I can't imagine that target audience is really that great a number of people. So I'm kind of forced to give this series a recommendation level of very low. I couldn't be more disappointed in this comic, and if a comic about Harley Quinn isn't made for a huge Harley Quinn fan like me, who is it for? Who is it for? The collected editions get 3 Harley Quinns, 2 Red Tools, and 1 Own Joker. That breaks down like this. All the collections have a cover gallery in the back, with volumes 1, 2, 5, and 6 having a bonus art gallery, though that's only 2 pages long in volume 2. Volume 3 also has the shortest cover gallery, and the order that things are collected in for volumes 2 and 3 are pretty confusing. For example, the special introducing the character Ae isn't collected until volume 3, but the regular issues he appears in following that special are collected in volume 2, making his appearances as you read through the books a little confusing. Volume 6 is also the shortest, with only 5 issues collected, though they do try to make up for it with extra extras in the back. Thanks everybody for watching! I hope everyone had a good Valentine's Day, or Harley Quinn Day as I like to refer to it. I haven't seen the Birds of Prey movie yet, though I do plan to, but if you have, let me know how you think it compares to the depictions of the character in this series, or just what you thought of it in general. That's all for now, but I'll be back next week, so I hope to see you then, right here, in the Comic Cave.